year is 1939, the year that marks the start of World War II, the deadliest war in history. In January, Hewlett-Packard Company is founded, and Texas A&M University wins its only football national championship. In January, Adolf Hitler orders Plan Z, a 5-year naval expansion program intended to provide a German fleet capable of crushing the Royal Navy by 1944. 2 days later, Hitler speaks before the Reichstag, warning that if Jewish financiers start a war against Germany, the results will be the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe. In 1939, everyone was singing along with Judy Garland, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, as the movie The Wizard of Oz made its debut. In March, a 3-year Arab revolt in Palestine ends. Also in March, students at Harvard University demonstrate the new tradition of swallowing goldfish to the reporters. Before the month would end, Neville Chamberlain gives a speech in the House of Commons, offering the British guarantee of the independence of Poland. In early April, Adolf Hitler orders the German military to start planning for a fall invasion of Poland. In April, African-American singer Marian Anderson performs before 75,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial after being denied the use of Constitutional Hall by the DAR. May 1st, Batman makes his first appearance in a comic book. May 2nd, Major League Baseball's Lou Gehrig ends a 2,130 game playing streak, contracting what would be known as Lou Gehrig's disease. May 6th, the British government is informed that the German and Soviet governments are secretly beginning to plan to divide Eastern Europe between them. May 11th, our story begins.
The 1939 Dodge sedan slowly makes its way up the tree-lined avenue, entering the neighborhood of imposing residents, some with coach houses, where footmen's stepping stones and horse-tethered posts are found. Rolling manicured lawns and a wooded field comes into sight. The sedan slows as it approaches the 3-storied stucco house with its 2 signature chimneys that can be seen as far away as the observation tower on the city's crest. The driver turns to his wife, holding their newborn infant, their 3rd child, and first to be born into this house. This is your new home, Merle. 1723 East 2nd Street, Duluth, Minnesota, was more than the house in which I spent the early years of my life. It was more than the storehouse of lifelong memories. The white
3-storied stucco house was built at the turn of the century as a statement of power and prestige by one Rufus H. Draper. We don't know the exact year the house was constructed, but according to an article that appeared on the front page of the Duluth Herald Tribune, the address of the Rufus Draper family was 1723 East 2nd Street. Front page news was of Rufus being clocked by the Duluth Police Department, traveling in his new car in downtown at the breakneck speed of 20 miles an hour. The speed limit was 6 miles per hour. We never learned of the outcome of his arraignment, but despite his run-in with the law, he did build and furnish the house of my youth. What is clear is that Rufus Draper was accustomed to travel in the fast lane, and so it comes as no surprise that 1723 came equipped with the latest innovation of its day, a huge central vacuum cleaner in the basement, which connected to each room in the house. According to my research, in those days, such was found in only a few luxury dwellings in New York City, such as the Dakota and the Langham near Central Park, but rarely any place else.
of the Draper family, whose roots go back to the founding of America and the Revolutionary War. Rufus H. Draper was in the brokerage business, as well as the Minnesota Valley Canning Company, famous for the Jolly Green Giant label. My parents purchased the 20-room, 6-bedroom house complete with servants' quarters, in 1938. The house came with much of the original furniture, becoming a symbol of status and communal acceptance, real and imagined by my entire family. There was an elegance to 1723 from a bygone era. The three entrances, one of which was for the servants, the dumb waiter, the pearl button call buttons in each room for summoning the help from the kitchen. Though when we grew up, such luxuries were long gone. The maid, butler, and driver's quarters became a sewing room and place for my brothers to make their model airplanes. The apartment on the third floor became just that. The maid's call button under the carpet in the dining room became something Marilyn and I would play with to annoy our parents. The wine cold room became the place where Dad would make his homemade root beer and raspberry wine, often with explosive results. The pool room in the basement remained for our pleasure. Throughout the years, the house held its grandeur with its 4 working fireplaces, a central entrance hallway that ran from the front to the back of the house, the centerpiece of which was a stately staircase that flowed gracefully down over one end of the room, the location for formal family weddings. The spacious living room, often the reception hall for the community and national leaders such as Hubert Humphrey and Fritz Mondale, as well as Eunice Kennedy Shriver. There was the oak panel library with leaded glass enclosed shelves. From wainscoting to crystal doorknobs, no detail was overlooked at 1723. Even the brass plaque above the doorbell next to the front door with its large brass lion's head door knocker effectively announced all deliveries to be made in the rear of the house. Supposedly, Mom and Dad's purchase of the house was the talk of the town. The buzz on the street was, the Singers will never be able to afford to keep that house up. Mom and Dad were just waiting to prove them wrong, just as Mom would spend a lifetime proving the world was wrong. Not much remains of the grand old lady. For me, this desk from the oak panel library is my precious possession. I sit here to tell my ethical will, the stories from my life that I share with you and generations of our future. To you, my family, I am Dad, grandfather, papa, or dede, brother, uncle, or husband. The days of our family life have borne the color of my life's work and career, a rabbi. To be honest, I didn't always have my sights set on the rabbinate. It was only after my parents made it clear that my future did not lie with the family wholesale clothing business that I began my rabbinic studies. While I have no regrets, I have to admit that this career choice was and continues to remain a puzzlement, for I am plagued with severe dyslexia. School for me was often an insufferable challenge, and the study of language was simply torture. Yet, or rather, nevertheless, my success as a rabbi is testament to sheer willpower and good old-fashioned intestinal fortitude. I guess it didn't hurt that from my earliest days growing up at 1723, I've always been an unrepentant dreamer. As a young child, I would spend hours exploring my world with a fascinating sense of imagination. Often like those who can compose music from sounds surrounding them, I've spent my lifetime creating and nurturing dreams that have grown out of the sights and sounds of my world. Wondering what an unrepentant dreamer is? Well, then, an unrepentant dreamer is one who understands that even though his dreams must be saddled by the hard facts of reality before they can be rid off to the stars, the unrepentant dreamer believes with every fiber of his being that after the dreams romp among the stars, they will come back to their place in our lives, bringing with them the radiance from the heights, and giving off to all of our days the lift and magic of the stars. I tell you this story with the hope that it may serve as a reminder of what dreams can do for you. This movie is the story of those dreams.
Wherever our people have traveled, Torah has been carried in the arms of parents, taught one generation to the next. Within these ancient scrolls is said to be the secret of Jewish life from Sinai until now. For found within Torah's scroll is not only our biblical origins, but the law, lore, and divine constitution of the Jewish people, a sacred birthright to be remembered and lived. It should not be surprising, then, that the word found more frequently than any other in Torah is zachor, the Hebrew word for memory. Rabbi David Aronson, Myra's uncle, in whose home she spent the earliest years of her life, often spoke of memory. He said memory is our most precious possession, and that loss of memory would be the most destructive thing that could happen to us. It's our memories which shape us, our memories that define us. Take away those memories, and we're not ourselves anymore. We Jews are a people who do not blot out our memories and forget our past. Memory is the core of Judaism. In the religious year of the celebration, there are the Yizkor services, the prayer of Kaddish, and the moments of personal reflection. We pause to take stock of those who are gone, what they taught us, what they mean in our lives, and what legacy they leave for us, upon which to build our own tomorrows. It is for us to make those who loved us in the past honored partners in our lives as we go forward. So much of who we are today is illuminated by a journey through the pages of family history. I begin this story on June 3rd, 1966, the day I would stand on the bema of the historic Plum Street Temple in Cincinnati, Ohio, and be ordained a rabbi. For years, I often wondered of the source of this rabbinic career choice. Little did I know then of the undiscovered, or should I more accurately say, often overlooked, rabbinic legacy of our family. A legacy that reaches back to at least the 18th century, and a legacy which this documentary is all about. On that June day of 1966, filled with thoughts of a hopeful future, I opened what I had written on the biblical book of Isaiah to the dedication, to my family, to mother and father who nurtured hope within me, to my wife who cultivates that hope, to the generations yet to be, the hope for the future. So much has changed, so much has evolved through the years, as it ought to with what I would like to call Chapter 1, the life we live and the career and family we build. As one year blends into the next, the pages of Chapter 1 are filled with a myriad of things that occupy us by day and are nurtured by dreams at night. The lives we touch, and the people who leave their indelible life-changing marks upon us. The lives we create, and the love we share. Chapter 1. But what of Chapter 2, our precious legacy? What will remain of the meaning of the days and years of our life? What of what we have learned will be remembered? What of our stories, values, and lessons will our children and grandchildren bring into their lives? Memories of sacred moments shared, of a nurturing love? And who will tell the story? For years I have spoken from the pulpit and taught in the classroom the need to preserve our family story, along with the other valuable things we're concerned with passing on as part of our legacy to our children and grandchildren. And so I went in search of the beginnings of our family story, a search that led me to Poland, not only to the place of my mother's birth, but also to the origins of my rabbinic life. Come with me as we explore Chapter 2, A Precious Legacy. We begin with the Polish roots of the Naymark Singer family. I'm indebted to my uncle Sherman Neymark for his 2-volume family history in remembrance, the writings of my grandfather David Neymark, and the stories told by my mother of her early life in a Polish shtetl. Their memories, stories, and reflections are the beginning of this Routes to Roots journey. I have long believed that the way of building a strong future is by first understanding its origins. For my family, on my mother's side, that means going back 6 generations to the early master of the Hasidic movement, written about by Eli Wiesel, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, the Kotzker Rabbi. That is why I initiated in May of 2010 the search for our family's Polish history. But what can you learn from those who lived in another era and are long dead, is what we're about to find out as we set out to the places where once our family lived, recalling the stories they taught us, searching for their meaning in our lives, and to discover what place their world has in ours. In the Warsaw Jewish Cemetery, we searched out family graves and mausoleums, finding these of our family's ancestral rabbinic life, but more of that when we visit Koch. Despite the spring rains, we did make our way to the address where once stood the apartment home of our grandfather David Neymark, 33 Niska Street. Today, a school is located at 33 Niska. The address is only 1 block from Mila 18, which during World War II became the headquarters of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Our mother had fond memories of visiting the Neymark apartment, which she recalled as having floors so highly polished that she could see her reflection. She admitted once, as a little girl, becoming so mesmerized by this, coming from her primitive shtetl, that she could hardly contain her excitement. She recalled playing at 18 Miller Street. This area of Warsaw is also where the Neymark family continued to live until on this very spot the Nazis began to liquidate the ghetto and raze the entire area to the ground, leaving no trace of life.
My mother's parents lived in Warsaw. That was their home.
Oh, okay.
And I used to visit there. And we had a very fine relationship. At least I had a very fine relationship with my grandmother and grandfather in Warsaw. I occasionally saw my mother's parents who lived.
In the 1930s, this letter from Chaya Naymark, our grandfather's sister, describes the dire poverty the family endured. Chaya wrote on the harshness of life. To David and Lena Neymark, dear brother and sister-in-law, I received your letters and also one time money. Please forgive me that I haven't immediately given you an answer because I wasn't at home. A child of mine wasn't well. I was in the hospital with him. Now before Shabbat I have come home and already there are 2 letters from you and the money. Dear brother, I am very thankful for the money and send you an earnest wish from deep in my heart that only good should come from your way. I was with child in the hospital and came home once before receiving your letters and had a need for a couple of zlotys to buy things for the children, so I had to sell an item from the house. Now you write me suggesting that I sell more things. I would if I could, but unfortunately one doesn't get a buyer for this house. You suggest that I should live with Devora and Label, her brother and sister in Warsaw. If it be my lot to live a few years, I want a place where I can lay my body down and have bread and water. I see from your letters that your life is not exactly easy. You don't have a business and you carry around packages to sell door to door, which is very hard work. Yet one needs to thank God as long as one is well. Let us only be well and God will provide. You also suggest that I sell your furniture for money, but I must tell you, I don't have your furniture to sell. It's already sold. I'm left with a table, a couple of chairs, and a bed. So what more of this can I sell? Please write me about what is going on with you, what you are doing. How is your health? What is the news you have of Brendelin? Please greet Brendelin and her husband and children for me. Your sister and sister-in-law, Chaya Naymark, Warsaw. This letter has been accepted to be part of the permanent exhibit in the new Warsaw Jewish History Museum, scheduled to open in 2012 on Miller Street, 1 block from where our grandfather David grew up. Correspondence flowed across the ocean until one day after September of 1939, all letters stopped coming. In the ensuing silence came the tragic answer. Today we know only of our family in America and relatives in Denmark that carry the Neymark name. The resemblance of Amelia and our Danish relative and our granddaughter Haley is absolutely remarkable. Our journey to Poland was an exploration of the Polish and Jewish worlds our families lived in. So much of our life's experiences can be illuminated when seen through the lens of family history. Therefore, our family mission was to search out the Polish roots of our grandparents and the family's matriarch, our mother. Our mother, typical of the immigrant generation, spoke little of her childhood in Poland. Only in her latter years was she willing to recall those first 7.5 years of her life. Of that time she would say, "I was born 200 years ago," speaking of the primitive conditions of the Polish village that she had claimed no longer existed. In her village, where there was no running water, no modern sewage system, no electricity, and the floors of the houses were rough-hewn planks of wood. Though the house she lived in did have one bit of luxury. In the master bedroom, the ceiling could be opened, so on Sukkot, her great-grandparents could fulfill the mitzvah of sleeping in the sukkah. For our mother, the Polish village of Piszczał no longer existed. In her mind, the village of her youth was destroyed in World War I, shortly after she left for America. For years, we lived with the belief that all life in Piszczał ceased with the departure of our family. For our mother, there was nothing to go back to. The future, she used to say, is our concern. What is past. Leave it be. Don't be concerned with what happened yesterday. It cannot tell us what tomorrow will bring. America is our home. All that was, and is no more. She wasn't entirely wrong, as my nephew Jack reminded me. The past cannot tell us what tomorrow will bring, but its lessons can help guide us to shape tomorrow into something better that might have otherwise been possible. I don't think for a moment that she ever forgot her past. It's what propelled her to make a new life in America for her family, and to build a new Jewish community and encourage her children and grandchildren to do the same. In truth, the village of Brenda's youth survived the Great War, and still is found 16 miles southwest of Brest, 12 miles east-southeast of Bielopodolska, and 61 miles northeast of the regional capital, Lublin. In 1900, the Jewish population of Piszczał was about 400. In 1909, of those living in the area surrounding the village, 40% were Jews. Today, there is no Jewish presence in Piszczał, and the population of the entire community is about 1,000. Jewish life? Jewish life in Piszczał came to an abrupt end in August of 1942. When we were in Piszczał, a Mr. Kondrach saw us in the village square and came over to talk. He told us that his father remembered the Jewish community in the days the Nazis marched the Jews of Piszczał to the village of Lomaz, where he was told the Jews survived the war. However, we learned the truth of what happened in the book Ordinary Men, Reserve Battalion 101 and the Final Solution by Christopher R. Browning, who describes the story of how in 1942 a unit of ordinary middle-aged German reserve policemen were ordered to liquidate a Jewish village. Most of them had never fired a shot at a human being before, yet they killed with little hesitation and eventually went on to slaughter tens of thousands in cold blood. I will spare you the details of what happened, but the book specifically mentions the Jews of Piszczał, the men and children who, after they arrived in Lomaz, were senselessly murdered in a march to death in the forest. 400 years of a Jewish culture, a community that was almost half Jewish, the seat of Hasidic rich life in the lore of the Kotzker Rabbinic dynasty from which our family descends, all gone. All destroyed by Hitler, making the world, as he would say, Judenrein, blotting out from memory any trace of Jewish life and culture, turning gravestones into paving stones. How could we not go back, discover and record for future generations what was once so much a vital part of our family's heritage? For unlike Brenda, we didn't have to run from the monster that devoured her Polish home. As Jack reminded me, when you're running from a deadly monster, it's probably best not to look back. We have the advantage of the monster now being dead for 65 years, and it isn't so difficult to go back and even poke sticks at it to learn all we can about it and what really happened there. Let us start at the beginning of our journey. In Warsaw, we met our guide and genealogist, Michael Majewski, with bus and driver. In moments we were off on a venture few of us would ever have dreamed of experiencing. First stop, Liv. In this bucolic country village with homes of thatched roofs and farmyards that looked as if they were fresh from a child's book of nursery rhymes, the remnant of an ancient Polish castle came into view. It was the Nazis who destroyed this Polish national treasure. Shortly after the invasion in 1939, they not only wanted to wipe Poland from the map, but they set out to obliterate any vestige of its cultural past. They only stopped tearing down this monument when a Polish historian informed them that the castle's origins were of their own Germanic Teutonic heritage. Quickly, with Jewish slave labor, they began to repair what they had destroyed, using the bricks from the once beautiful synagogue in Vengrov, our next stop. Michael began our tour in Liv in Vengrov because the rabbi of Vengrov was our cousin, Rabbi Yaakov Mendel Morgenstern, a fourth-generation descendant of our ancestor, the Kotzker Rabbi. He was also the beloved son of another cousin, Rabbi Yitzchak Zelig Morgenstern, the Sokolover Rebbe. Rabbi Yaakov Mendel met a tragic end at the hands of the Nazis. On Kol Nidre night 1939, just a few weeks after the Germans captured the town, SS officers invaded the rabbi's home. Yaakov was dragged from his home, made to undress with only his prized shtreimel on his head, given a shovel and made to clean up the dung from the city square. That Kol Nidre night, a Nazi soldier murdered him. Today his house stands in disrepair, occupied by the homeless. Back on the bus, we're off to Sokolov. Sokolov was the seat of a thriving Jewish community under the rabbinate of Rabbi Yitzchak Zelig Morgenstern, a third-generation descendant of the Kotzker Rabbi and a cousin. Today, Sokolov is only a place of Jewish memory. The Jewish cemetery today is a park, and the synagogue buildings are now retail stores. Even the Sokolover Rebbe's home and court is now either an apartment building or a business establishment. We're not exactly sure which building it is. To the home of Rabbi Yitzchak Zelig Morgenstern, the Sokolover Rebbe, Mom came with her mother when Grandma Naymark had saved up enough money to join her husband in America. A blessing from the family rabbi was necessary before the journey could begin.
He wouldn't give my mother the blessing. He wouldn't give me the blessing. He gave my mother, he said, you've got to go join your husband, but she's the last of the line from the descendants of the Kotzker Rebbe. She's not to leave this country. And he wanted to take me and keep me there and raise me. He was a very prominent rabbi, and he had ushered into the Grand Hall, where he met there were many, many people there. Many of his disciples were there, just like a big court, you know.
Against the wishes of the great rabbi, our grandmother took her daughter to a new life in America. The last words heard from the Sokolover Rebbe by grandmother were, "If you insist on taking the girl to America, I will place a curse on you." Grandmother's first child born in America died in my mother's arms. Yitzchak Zelig died in 1939, before the Nazi invasion and the murder of his son. So he did not have to witness this tragedy, nor the one he unwittingly had destined for our mother, had our grandmother listened to him. In 1980, while traveling in Israel, I met the Sokolover Rebbe's daughters, Rivka and Leah. Rivka was married to Rabbi Aaron Bornstein. Rivka came to Israel, then Palestine, in 1933. It appears that Rabbi Bornstein came from the Suchover rabbinic line, which began with the marriage of Sarah Morgenstern, granddaughter of the Kotzker rabbi, to Rabbi Aaron Bornstein, the first Suchover Rebbe. Leah also came to Palestine in the 1930s, was married to Aaron Yaakov Greenberg, originally from Sokolov, and who in 1949 became vice president of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and later the deputy speaker of the Knesset. Leah and Rivka offered an insight to an understanding of Mom's recollection that there were litters of people with all kinds of illnesses waiting to see their father, the rabbi. He was, they said, a well-known expert in pharmacology, and for his followers he not only dispensed knowledge, but medicine. That night we stayed in the beautiful resort town of Kazimir Dolny. The Jewish community of Kazimir dates back to the 16th century. According to legend, of the many affairs of King Casimir the Great, one was the beautiful Jewish woman Esther. He was to have built a castle in a nearby village for his beautiful Jewish lover, and it is said that at the request of his Jewish mistress, the king granted all the Jews living in the kingdom of Poland extraordinary privileges and freedoms. Prior to World War II, Kazimierz was 85% Jewish. I imagine Kazimierz was a Jewish version of the Catskills. The next day we continued to Polway and visited the palaces of former Polish nobility. This Baroque classic palace and park complex dates from the 1600s. Our family history is linked to the community of Polway through the Morgenstern rabbinic line. Yitzhak Zelig Morgenstern, the Sokolova Rebbe, who refused to bless Mom and Grandma Neymark before coming to America, his brother and a cousin to us, Rabbi Moses Mordecai Morgenstern, was the chief rabbi of Polway. We visited his mausoleum in Warsaw.
Hasidim were a very, very large group, and it wasn't one rabbi. There were hundreds of rabbis that had their own kingdom, so to speak.
Unto Koch, in the residence of our ancestor and founder of Hasidic Judaism, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, the Kotzker Rebbe. But not before Cousin Jeannie requested that we stop and clarify exactly how we were related to the famous Kotzker Rabbi and the Morgenstern rabbinic line.
What was the connection with the Kotzker Rebbe, the Hasidic?
I think that her mother and her grandmother...
Her meaning your mother?
My mother's grandmother was... either was the daughter of the Kotzker Rebbe or the granddaughter of the Kotzker Rebbe. And it came from, the Kotzker Rebbe had 7 daughters and 4 sons, and it was one of the daughters that were connected with it.
Let us begin with Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, who lived from 1787 to 1859. We could probably go 3 generations further back to almost the beginning of Polish Jewish history, but let's start with Menachem Mendel in 1787. As you see, Menachem Mendel was married to Glicka Ney. They had 5 children, the oldest being a son by the name of David. David was a rabbi married to Tova Dishkis. Rabbi David and Tova had 11 children. The 7th child was a daughter named Glicka. Glicka was married to Rabbi Yaakov Flumenbaum of Pischah. Glicka and Yaakov had 2 children. The oldest was Chaim Leib. Chaim Leib was married to Chaya Nechama Felsenstein. Chaim Leib lived only 19 years, but before he died, he and Chaya had a daughter and a son. The daughter was Galilea, our grandmother, who married David Neymark on December 1st, 1905, in Pischah. David and Galilea, also known as Lena, had 5 children: Brenda, Pearl, Sherman, Lenny, Madeline, also known as Harriet. Therefore, following our family line back to Rabbi Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, the descent goes. First generation descendant of the Kotzker Rebbe, his son David. Second generation descendant, David's daughter Glicka Flummenbaum. Third generation descendant, Glicka's son Chaim Lev. Fourth generation descendant, Chaim Lev's daughter Gela Leah. Fifth generation descendant, Gela Leah's children, Brenda, Pearl, Sherman, Lenny, and Nadalyn. Sixth generation descendant, our generation, on this trip and in this documentary, Merle, Sharon, and Jeannie. Seventh generation descendant, our children and our siblings' children, represented on this trip by Jack Modell. And the eighth generation descendants are our grandchildren. Arriving in Koch, easily found is the Morgenstern family home. The house is now divided into several apartments, but it still appears as it did when the Morgensterns lived in it. We were told that the house is over 150 years old, and so Menachem Mendel himself may have lived in this house. Who was this early master of the Hasidic movement, described by Abraham Joshua Heschel and Elie Wiesel as a soul on fire with a burning passion for truth? There are no pictures of him. He would not allow such. All we have is this line drawing. And of his writings, this too he would not allow to be published. All we have is what his students related and recalled. Menachem Mendel was born in 1787 to a fairly well-to-do family. As a young man, he embraced Hasidism in defiance of his father, who wanted him to go into business. In his early years, the young followed him. Enchanted, they asked nothing more than he let them link their destiny to his. They danced, they sang, they studied together, they shared joys and discoveries, failures and longings. It was like a commune. Often the Rebbe would walk the fields and forests with them, and there, in direct contact with nature, he would share his dreams. Man, he said, must be thirsty for truth, for the absolute, and never mind if he never reaches his goal, and never mind if the absolute takes revenge on whoever glimpses it. For Mendel, thou shalt not steal meant, thou shalt not steal from thyself, not deceive thyself. As he said, it may not be within our power to find truth, but it is up to us to reject lies, hypocrisy, and cheating. Reb Mendel's teachings were not easily accepted by the local rabbis of his day, and it became best for him to take his disciples to Koch, or Kotsk, as it was called, a small and largely Jewish town. Population, 1,652 Jews, 1,270 Christians. Before World War II, the town was 75% Jewish. Here he became famous for his unrelenting search for truth. As he said, the true worship of God was not in finding the truth, but rather in an honest search for it. And if in the journey you encounter pain, who said God does not prefer your tears? In the eyes of God, what is considered whole, complete, is often a broken heart. His students once challenged him by asking the rabbi where God is to be found. God, he said, is where you let God in. The rabbi was uncompromising in his demands, not only upon his students, but also upon himself. He spent the last 20 years of his life in silence. No one knows exactly what happened, but here is the way Elie Wiesel tells the story. Having learned of the new pogroms that were laying waste the Jewish communities in Poland and Russia, the Rebbe reportedly flew into a rage and pounded the table, roaring, "I demand that justice be done. I demand that the supreme legislator obey his own laws. How long are we going to go on paying? Will this injustice and suffering never end?" And then he became silent. No one knows why this happened in the year 1839. Elie Wiesel has suggested, maybe, just perhaps, it was that he could have foreseen that 100 years after his retreat, another fire would set the continent ablaze, and its first and last victims would be Jewish men and women, abandoned by God and by all mankind. Could it be, from that moment on, he planned to fight fire with fire, attempting to prepare us, demanding that we be strong, intransigent, capable of resisting evil, no matter what form it takes, the comfort of faith included, capable of resisting even God and the hope in God. Rabbi Menachem Mendel spent the rest of his days in silence. In his silence, he challenged to us, as reflected in the words of the Yom Kippur afternoon service, silence. Where in this Holocaust is the Word of God? Not in the storm, nor in the shaking earth, nor in the fire, but only within us. Today, the many followers of his dynasty are part of the powerful Ger Hasidim in Jerusalem. With the Rebbe's death in 1859, his Hasidim followed Yitzchak Meir, the founder of the Ger Hasidim, who was said to be close to the people and more accessible than was Menachem Mendel. Why the mantle of leadership did not proceed to the Rebbe's son David, I do not know, but a clue might be found in that only was Yitzchak Meir of Ger good friends of Menachem Mendel, but after the Rebbe's wife Glicka died, Menachem Mendel married the sister of Yitzchak Meir's wife, and the rest is history. We were about to conclude our visit to the Morgenstern family home when we met some of the Polish residents of the home. They were vague in how they came upon making the Morgenstern home their home. Unfortunately, it's difficult to prove how Nazi, Pole, or Communists appropriated Jewish property. But it is known that even before the Nazis drove the Jewish families from their homes, there were incidents where armed Polish neighbors took by force Jewish property. We concluded our visit to Koch with time at the Kotzker Rebbe's grave. When we visited the sacred site, we began to realize the power exerted by the rabbis like Menachem Mendel. These were not men to be taken lightly. Entire communities relied on their wisdom not only in determining religious affairs, but their advice was sought in daily affairs. From business decisions to marriage and raising of children, the Rebbe's words were looked to. Even in death, adherents would come to the Rebbe's grave with their pleas written on little slips of paper, which, with prayer, would be left for the Rebbe's spirit to handle. These rabbis were known as tzaddikim, or righteous ones, and their role in their followers' lives became
almost saint-like. Before we leave Cook, I should show you the documentary proof of our family relationship to the Morgenstern rabbinic line. This letter. The letter is dated 4th of Cheshvan, 5665, October 4th, 1904. It is from Rabbi Yitzchak Zelig Morgenstern, Mom's cousin. The return address refers to Yitzchak Zelig as Chief Rabbi Sokolov and District. And the letter is addressed to our grandfather David Neymark's father, Herschel, in Warsaw. The letter is a request for Yitzchak Zelig's son, Rabbi Mendel, Rabbi Evengrov, to be a house guest in the Neymarks, while he is in Warsaw on business. The letter refers to Herschel as Mechutin, a term used to indicate that families are related through marriage. In this case, the Morgenstern family and the Neymark family are related to the engagement and the marriage to be of Herschel's son David to Lena Gail Fullenbaum. As you can see from this chart, Lena Gail's grandmother is Gutke Morgenstern, who is Yitzchak Zelig's aunt. This letter is a priceless heirloom. The original is on file at the American Jewish Archives on the campus of the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, Cincinnati campus. As it's time to move on to this job, I think about my rabbinic ancestry, all of which I had no knowledge of when I began the journey to my chosen career. The Kotzker Rabbi went into silence exactly 100 years before I was born, and he ended that silence with his death in 1859, exactly 100 years from when I began my rabbinic studies. to affect social change and justice in my own day. At one time, a Nakamando offered his support to the Polish National Revolution against the Russian occupant, what became known as the November Uprising of 1830. During the uprising, which historians say was the best of all time, the rabbi signed proclamations and appeals, as well as lent his name to collection of funds. When the revolution is crushed and the Russians threaten the rabbi with arrest, he changes his name and Elbrin becomes Morgenstern. Although I never went even close to the extremes he did, although there is no comparison between our two lives, political social action has played a significant role in my rabbinate. As I read today with a rabbi taught and reflect on my mother's life, it appears that a lot of what was heard in our family home was the rabbi's words in my mother's voice. Yet I never remember her once even quoting or discussing him. Could it be that what we inherit from past generations, our ancestral gene pool, determines not only our physical features, but influences how we act and approach life itself? The past is never completely gone. It is not even past. William Faulkner. I will save this discussion for the family chronicle I'm writing, whose working title is Breaking the Mold, A Journey Beyond Image. We finally arrive at the family hometown, Pisjah. Elvis parks the bus on the village square. Time stood still for us. To me, the village was not quite real. We were in Pisjah. The sign on the square said so. Yet this village, for me, was more a kaleidoscope of multicolored stories of our mother as a little girl running and playing along a stream that ran through the town. Sitting quietly in a corner of the family store, the front of the house, we sat on the village square. We all looked up and began to guess. This house? Or maybe that one? Could it be? Here once stood the home of Mom's great-grandmother. Here on this square, by this fountain, where our story began. once a year was anti-Semitism raised to an intolerable level. Just past the church is a stream that runs through the village. Here is the place Mom would tell of the Tashlich ceremony, when on Rosh Hashanah the men would gather to symbolically drop their sins in the form of breadcrumbs into the water. The synagogue in this jar no longer exists, but the area of the Jewish cemetery is easily found. A decaying fence surrounds the grounds. There are no more gravestones, having been removed by the Nazis from one of their paving projects. Only an overgrown field of grass, a few trees, and one birch tree stands witness to the sacred ground. Here lies all that's left of a vibrant Jewish community, a song of life that once echoed across the Polish countryside. It is raining and the driver is anxious to get us back to Warsaw, but I cannot leave. I'm drawn to the birch tree. Could it be? Here is where my mother's great-grandfather, Anshel Felsenstein, husband of Yocheved, is buried. My mother fondly remembered him. The hours she and he would spend together. A little girl nestled in his lap, her head resting gently against his soft white beard, listening to him relate the stories, law and lore of the ancient texts, the Talmud, Midrash, and the Bible. The few times Mom would speak of her great-grandfather, her face would soften as her eyes would look out to a special place of memory, and in a quiet voice she would speak of the man who nurtured her soul. Our mother, who could not otherwise give in to emotion, nor admit to nostalgia, would share these precious memories of Anshel. Anshel died in 1911 at age 69. Mom remembers his funeral, which was attended by rabbis from all the nearby towns and villages. 2 years after Mom and grandmother departed for America in 1914, Yocheved died at the age of 72. With her passing, the last known vestige of family life in this church came to an end. Through the camera's lens, I stood looking at the resting place of the one who in many ways was the source of my rabbinic life's work. I'm beginning to understand how my mother's nurturing childhood memories of Anshel became the foundation of my own comfort and commitment to Judaism, all of which played a significant role in my becoming a rabbi. I was beginning to see this job, as my nephew Jack described it, sacred ground, because it was the soil from which we came, and also the soil on which we lost so many precious lives and loved ones. At least thoughts I shall write in the family chronicle. The camera snapped, pictures taken, and we returned to Warsaw. On the return ride to Warsaw, I began to think about Mom's great-grandparents, Glitka Morgenstern and Yaakov Flomenbaum, and Yocheved and Anshel Felsenstein. Both the couples lived in this job and were a similar age. Glitka was born about 1830. I'm not sure of the year she died. Yocheved was born in 1844 and died in 1916. Her husband Anshel was born in 1842 and died in 1911. One other piece of information. Chaya Nakama, Mom's grandmother, did remarry when she went with her son to Lublin. Her husband's name was Moshe Lerman, and they had 4 children, Sarah, Herschel, Turba, and Shmuel. I believe they survived the war, and their families live in Israel. As the bus made its way along the rain-soaked highway, I realized that here was where my grandfather once traveled, departing Poland, leaving his young wife and baby daughter to fend for themselves in this job. For years later, my mother and grandmother traveled this very road as they too began a new life in America. So it was Rabbel who wanted to come here. And he wanted to come here. He was the one. So much of who we are today can be understood by a journey through the pages of family history. Mysteries that may baffle and confound can take on clarity when seen rooted in behavior of previous generations. In facing life's daily challenges, each of us is free to respond in our own unique way. Yet there is a part of us, often buried deep within, which carries yesterday's inherited characteristics into our world of today. The more we understand yesterday's generations, the freer can we be in the life choices we make. A parting thought. In the book, Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer, a story in which the mysteries of one family's life are revealed through research of family history. We learn, contrary to what we are often raised to believe, that our traditions, religious rituals, customs, and even religious or Jewish identity exist because we accept them. It is just the opposite. We exist because of our traditions, religious rituals, customs, and even our religious Jewish identity. That, my friends, is what the search for our legacy is all about. This movie of My Ethical Will has taken us back in time to search for the challenges of tomorrow's generation. At the conclusion of our family story, we turn to the book Everything is Illuminated, where we learn that at the core of our identity, of who we are, at the core of how we present ourselves to the world, are found the traditions, religious rituals, and customs of our religion. We spend a lifetime building this identity that gives us a sense of well-being, an identity that we often wear as a badge of honor. Consider for a moment our family. Our ancestors were Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, Chinese, and Irish. We are Jewish, or we choose to live as part of the Jewish community. The spiritual histories of our family are Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, or Taoist, all of which forms the root core of who we are. Margaret's uncle, Rabbi David Aronson of blessed memory, once spoke of the two European cities with castles, Prague and Krakow. In Prague, there is a clock tower, unique as the Jewish people itself. Actually, there are two clocks on this tower, one with Roman numerals and another with Hebrew letters. The one with Roman numerals turns clockwise, while the Hebrew letter clock runs in just the opposite direction. Both keep the same time, but differently. This ancient tower with its two clocks speaks to the Jewish need to live in two worlds at the same time. From Jewish history, the great achievements of Judaism, the prayer book, the Talmud, the books of Jewish mysticism, which spoke of our human obligation to repair the broken fragments of our world, I believe resulted from Jews freely mixing with the Greek, Muslim, and Christian cultures. So many of our folkways grew out of the non-Jewish cultures among whom we lived. But we wouldn't even have the Hanukkah drill or Hanukkah guild or potato latkes if it weren't that these customs have their origins in the folk practices associated with Christmas Eve in medieval Germany. So it is that throughout the ages, our Jewish and non-Jewish worlds have been enriched one by the other. There is an old Yiddish proverb, you can't dance at two weddings at the same time. So how do we balance these two worlds into which we spend our life dancing? Throughout our life, we are confronted with the challenge of while living in a non-Jewish world, how to keep our Jewish identity intact. Not compromising our Jewish self, while at the same time being engaged in the world of the other. A difficult task in the best of times, made that much more challenging, if not impossible to keep, in times of deep-seated prejudice and outright hatred. As rich and beautiful as our heritage is, and as important it is for us to preserve it, for most of us, we don't live in the isolated Polish villages of 100 years ago. Our village is a global village. We have to find a way of weaving our heritage and our Jewish identities into the large fabric of the global village. In accepting this challenge, there are risks. If we insist on living only with other Jews, all in the name of self-preservation, we lose out on the richness of being part of the larger fabric, and always being seen as the outsider. And the other risk is when we try to blend in and become like everyone else, making our Judaism appear almost invisible. That is when we end up losing our identity to the larger fabric of society, and live out our days not knowing who we really are. Our challenge, your challenge. Find a way to weave the religious and secular together into one fabric, and not lose the color or weave of our own thread. An image from the last night of our Rouse Through's Poland mission illustrates the opportunities that await. In lighting the Havdalah candle, we use the candlestick rescued by the Lefkowitz family of Rose and Cherry from the fires of the Holocaust. What makes the Havdalah candle unique is that it is not just one candle, but many candle strands woven together, which when lit, produces a flame that is greater than the sum of its parts. So it can be with us. We combine the unique light of our Judaism with that of our Christian and Muslim neighbors. With the light we produce, there can be no force of darkness that can overcome us. leave you with the story. A rabbi once asked his students how he can tell when night had ended and day had returned. His students responded, "Could it be when we see an animal in the distance and can tell whether it's a dog or a cat?" "No," answered the rabbi. "Well, could it be when we look at a tree in the distance and can tell whether it's an orange or a grapefruit tree?" "No." "Well then," the students asked, "when is it?" "It is," replied the rabbi, "when we look at the face of another man and woman and see that he or she is our brother or sister. Because if we cannot do that, then no matter what time it is still night. For too long we endured in darkness. We are children, children's children, and we
live to explore light's new dawning. Lakotsker once said, "Intolerance lies at the core of evil, not the intolerance that results from any threat or danger, but intolerance of another who dares to exist, intolerance without cause. It is so deep within us because every human being secretly desires the entire universe to himself. The only way out is to learn compassion without cause, to care for each other simply because the other exists. Now it is for you, the future generations, to write your legacy." I'm Merle. This is the story of my family told through 16mm movies that my dad took from 1938 to 1954. For years we thought the film was lost, but thanks to my nephew Blake, the footage was found in the summer of 2008.
If not for mothers, if not for fathers, the generations would end, leaving their homelands, armed with their bare hands. They built a life for their heirs. Shine a light, one to guide and to nurture. Fill us up with your hope, strength, and love. The door vador nagid God let come. The next generation is born. With endless passion, you help to fashion the kind of world it should be. A place that fostered your sons and daughters. They lived a life that was free. Shine a light, one to to guide and to nurture. Fill us up with your hope, strength, and love. L'dor vador nagid God lecha. The next generation is born. It's not as important to your grandparents' work as what your grandchildren became. When history looks back to judge who you were, they will be the measure of your fame. Of your life we sing, it's full of blessings, a melody's sweet refrain. With a sense of pride that's held deep inside, we carry on your proud name. Shine a light, one to guide and to nurture. Fill us up with your hope, strength, and love. L'dor vador nagid God.
When Myra and I were in Berlin, we paid a visit to the zoo. There my camera portrayed photographically our challenge. Taking pictures of lions and tigers, I saw to my amazement the scene as the camera saw it. At first there are the large cats, safely tucked away in their cage, they in their world and we in ours. Then as I moved the camera setting for a close-up, the bars that separated us began disappearing. In truth, they were still there, but in the camera's eye, they were gone. What you are witnessing is not the result of trick photography or Photoshop, but what the camera actually saw. Therefore, for me, it becomes a paradigm for what can happen in personal relationships. To the generations of tomorrow, I offer this model. Identity strong and securely built, where we're not afraid to express our differences, the essence of who or what we are. But then as we come to know the others in our world, and they us, what we would see would go beyond what separates, to focus upon what makes us brothers and sisters of one family and one God.